know a bit more about me, because when people are talking about me on social media, I realise there are certain things I haven't explained to people about why I'm standing up here. My father, aged 18, was sent to Berlin at the end of the war to release the prisoners of war. When I was a child, he took me around those prisoner of war camps. He made me march through the fields of the Somme. He made me go row upon row upon row of white crosses, an unknown soldier, 1914 to 1918. He reminded me that my great uncle William Harvey was one of the first into Gallipoli, along with his brother. There's a website dedicated to him. He's called the Anzac Hero. And there's a letter from him on the front line, which makes very heartbreaking reading. He delivers it very matter of fact. You know, here we are, we're doing our best. And then he talks about his friends and colleagues who have been blown to bits, will never be the same again. And he puts a brave face on and says, here we are, we'll carry on. My uncle Stan was caught by the Germans and was put in a German prisoner of war camp and tortured. He escaped with the help of the French resistance, bless their hearts, and the Spanish resistance, and he made it back to England. But because he knew how awful it was in the prisoner of war camps, he went back out there for another pop, right? That's what we do for each other. We are brothers and sisters, we are all one humankind, and when tyranny and oppression starts to take over us, we must unite and we must fight back, and we must never ever forget what our ancestors did for us, so that we can stand here paying them tribute and determined to hold the baton in our hands and carry on the fight. We will not back down. And do you know why? Because every single one of us is sovereign in our own right. We are all born free human beings. Nobody is in charge of us, right? We are all born with sovereign, inalienable, fundamental rights. They are God-given, right? And in this Constitution, we are a Christian nation by law. So before the Romans came along, we were upholding the Old Testament. And Exodus chapter 20 specifically says, thou shalt not kill. Right? We all know that one. Thou shalt not kill. And then when Jesus came along and we became a Christian country, we upheld the New Testament as well as the Old Testament. And then we had a whole body of laws. One of the most fundamental one is, first, do no harm. Yes. Right? Absolute principle law. Do no harm to your neighbour or each other or yourself. The second one is, because you have an inalienable right to life, you are sovereign over your own mind and body. Yes. Yes. You have bodily integrity that nobody gets to breach. And your right to life, nobody can take that apart from in two circumstances. One is if there's been a judgment by a court properly convened and you are judged by your peers, by a jury, and they're found guilty and a death sentence is passed down. That can be legal. The other time it's legal is between armed combatants, where they are both armed and it's a fair fight. And even then you don't get to kill each other. The aim is to disable each other. Right? So if you kill someone, even in war, you can be held up in a court tribunal in martial arts? In a martial arts court case. They'll find you guilty. But you know, it's murder. It's still murder unless you've got a lawful excuse. So I want everybody to understand that, because when you look at our own constitution, you will find in the Magna Carta 1297, Chapter 29, that none of us can be imprisoned, outlawed, exiled, killed, or in otherwise destroyed. Now, the reason that that's so important in this country is because the 1297 1967 Magna Carta is a legally binding contract between the Crown and we the people. The Constitution is the solution, you're right. Well, God's the solution actually in my view, but the Constitution represents God's view on earth if we get the laws right. So anyway, the Magna Carta is a binding contract between the Crown and we the people. And incidentally, our ancestors paid a 15th of their movables for that contract. So it's a legally binding one with due consideration. And it binds all the Crown's heirs and successors in perpetuity. And it's been granted to us and our successors in perpetuity. And that deal is sworn as an oath by the monarch to us, a three-part oath. The first part of the oath is that they will uphold our laws as consented upon in Parliament. So the laws that must be upheld in accordance with the coronation oath is our common law, our customs and usages, the acts of Parliament that have been consented to, and God's laws in accordance with the Old and New Testament. Obviously we now have it European and international law as well. The middle part is that judgment shall not be denied to any person, and mercy will be overseen in all judgments. The third part is that the Church has inviolable rights and privileges, and those must be upheld. Now the monarch has to swear that oath to we the people, and indeed has done so for around 2,000 years. Because that's the deal. The law maketh the king, not the king maketh the law. Right? The king is put there because we put them there. We are sovereign. These are our laws. This is our land. And incidentally, just a personal aside, I'm 74% English, 15% Scottish, 5% Irish, and 3% Welsh, and only 6% Northern German European, whatever bit. But anyway, so this is my land, and I'm sure it's your land. And these are our laws. These are our laws. So question to you all, is the coronation oath being upheld? Who's responsible for that? Because I tell you what, Our Majesty, bless her, is a 95-year-old woman. She's delegated that responsibility to her Crown agents. These guys over there, and others. So if they are in breach of their coronation oath, they are putting our Queen's oath in jeopardy. That's our Queen's soul that they're talking about, right? And in the meantime, we've allowed that situation to happen because the deal is that the monarch will make sure that all the agents will comply with the law. And that is also in the Magna Carta. In the general saving provisions at the back of it, you will see that the monarch orders all of his men to treat everybody the same and to uphold all the laws. Now, for those of you who don't know your history, what happened in 1627 was that the monarch once again was in breach of the coronation oath. So we petitioned the monarch. And this is something that I want to raise with you, because that is one of our ways of getting this situation redressed, is that we submit a petition to the Crown to say our laws are being upbroken, they must be upheld. That's what we had to do in 1627 with the Petition of Right. You can find that and the Magna Carta on www.legislation.gov.uk. They're on our statute books, but search them and read them. Because what came out of the 1627 Petition of Right was that our monarch continued to ignore our rights. And in 1641, a civil war broke out that killed 1 in 10 people. And we fought a very bitter war for 6 years. And at the end of that war, the king was tried and was found guilty of treason because he was trying to hire foreign armies to come in and help him fight against his own people. So then we had a period without a monarch, and in 1688, when the next monarch came to the throne, We said you are not going to ascend to the throne unless you again agree to uphold all our rights. And we issued another Declaration of our Rights, the Bill of Rights 1688. Fast forward to the Second World War. And I don't know how many of you actually know what happened, because one of the due diligences that I'm doing is finding out how much people know about the law and their history and the Constitution. And I'm absolutely mortified and horrified to find out that most people don't know about the Nuremberg trials that were brought by the lawyers at the end of the war. And they don't know the significance of them, and they seem to have forgotten them. And I promised my family I would never let people forget. So what happened at the end of the Second World War was that when people like my father went to release the prisoners of war, they found the most horrific atrocities that at that time had ever happened in the history of humanity. And in particular, what was happening was that medical treatment and medical experimentation was being conducted on people without their consent. Horrific experiments, including, for example, a typhoid vaccine, right, that was given to people without their consent. People were put in freezing cold tanks of water until they died. People had, I won't go into it, but anyway, at the end of that, the criminals were brought to trial, and there were the various different cases, including the medical cases. Now what happened with the medical cases is that doctors and nurses who were experimenting on people were brought to trial. And what came out of that was the court looked at the law and said, the law is already in place. You don't get to derogate from somebody's right to life. You don't get to breach their bodily integrity. Everyone is sovereign, and they are not armed combatants in the field. So anything you do that derogates from their right to life is potential murder, grievous bodily harm, assault. Because regardless of the situation, criminal law applies. So at the end of that, various doctors and nurses unfortunately lost their lives because they were found guilty. Now what came out of that was 10 principles called the Nuremberg Code. And that first one of those principles says the voluntary consent of the live human subject is essential. And that means that they have to be informed of what's going to happen to them, what risks, what benefits, what the long-term consequences are to them. And if they don't consent, then you can't give them that treatment. If you force it on them, then that is a criminal act. If you force it on lots of people, then that becomes crimes against humanity and genocide. So what we have here currently is members of our own community forcing experimental medical treatment on others. The masks are experimental. There's 123 years worth of scientific research that I myself have read through, which proves that they've known for 123 years that these masks cause harm. The main cause of death in the Spanish flu was from secondary bacterial pneumonia. It wasn't a flu. Okay? The tests, they are also experimental. They are also causing harm. And we know about these injections. These are killing people across the world. I am getting the most horrendous evidence being given to me. A physician phoned me up on Wednesday. He spent 3 hours on the phone to me, telling me what was happening to his so-called vaccinated patients. Horrendous. I won't go into it here. I'm afraid it's too upsetting. But the fact is that the doctors and the scientists who have done their due diligence, who have looked at the blood work of their patients, who have done post-mortems, who have followed up the injuries, they are calling this murder. They are calling it murder. And indeed it is, because under our law, under the Offences Against the Person Act, if you inflict bodily injury on another person, that is only lawful if they have consented freely, without coercion, without sanctions, without the threat of the loss of their jobs. They have to consent freely. And in our law, you can't consent to being murdered, and you can't consent to grievous bodily harm. What you can consent to is a assault, if it's a minor assault, which being injected with something amounts to. But if you're being told that they're assaulting you for the purposes of putting in this substance, but it won't harm you, it's perfectly safe, it's effective, and there's going to be no long-term consequences, and you say yes to that assault, that's only lawful if they've actually told you all the information. If they've obtained your consent on a whole bunch of lies, they have just assaulted you, they have battered you. If you then suffer harm or die a serious injury, that's grievous bodily harm, and it's murder. And do you know why? Because the moment you stick someone with a needle, you've intended to do that. It wasn't an accident. So you had the necessary intent. If you don't obtain lawful consent, then that is a criminal act for which you will be held personally, criminally liable, as were those doctors and nurses in the Nuremberg trials. So that's where we are, folks. And what we want to do as veterans, and what we have been doing, is helping local communities find out who are perpetrating these crimes in the community, serving them with a notice of liability. And the notice of liability says, you will be held civilly and criminally liable for all your actions and omissions, because omitting to act is as guilty as acting to cause harm. So if you stand by and ignore it all, you're as guilty. Thank you. Say it again. Omitting to act in this country, under the law, omitting to act is as guilty as acting to cause harm. You don't get to look the other way. So what we have are members of our own society committing these grievous, experiments on people, and that actually amounts to a grave breach of the Geneva Conventions as well. This is an unlawful act of war being committed by members of our own society on others. So the way we're going to deal with this lawfully and peacefully, find out who the perpetrators are, find out who the aiders and abettors are, find out who the complicit are, serve them with a notice of liability, and if they do not stop, these are the people we are going to be bringing to trial. So we've already managed to get a couple of crime references, because these have been reported to the police, and thankfully some decent police are doing their job as public servants and actually investigating. So we now have crime references. Now I don't know whether you know, but there's been a murder case launched in India. A 23-year-old man died following the injection, and he was coerced into taking it because he was told he couldn't travel on the train to get to work unless he did. He's dead. So what happened there was that the locals had put lots of affidavit evidence to the police, and the police had refused to investigate. So they are defendants in the murder charge now as well. So what we're doing is we're inviting you all, when you find out who's committing these crimes, to serve a notice on them, because the notice includes lots of evidence as well, and you serve that with your affidavit of truth, which is simply a statement saying, here is my evidence of the harm that's been caused to me or my family or somebody I know. Here's the law that you're breaking. Here's the evidence. Investigate it. And I'm giving you that as my statement of truth to the best of my knowledge and belief, so help me God. Now the advantage of that is that any police who refuse to take a legal affidavit of evidence, you then serve a notice on them, because then they are now aiding and abetting and complicit. So once we get these people done, we can then start the trials. Now people are asking, when are these Nuremberg 2 trials going to happen? And unfortunately what we have is a situation that unless the police start cooperating with us, unfortunately people are taking it into their own hands and affecting citizens' arrests. But you've still got to take these people somewhere and have them detained and charge them. So at this point, I need you all to engage with your local police and help them to understand what's going on. We need these crimes investigated, and we must get them stopped. People are being killed. So, are you on for doing that? Are you fantastic? Well, the veteransforpurpose.org.uk, there's a whole team of people now, lawyers and all sorts of people, who are waiting to hear from you with your... I'm being told something, yes? Hang on, Pete will tell you, because he is actually the one who created the website.
Hi everybody, I'm not really good at doing this kind of thing, but we have two charities that we're setting up. One is veteranswithpurpose.org.uk, and that is about uniting veterans, helping them to, with all the effects that have been going on, helping veterans to find their purpose. And I'm not only talking about army veterans, I'm talking about police, paramedics, doctors. All of those are welcome to come, because we're all uniting, and there's a lot of people realizing that things just aren't right. So we have to give love to everybody, whether they have had the jab or not, because a lot of people have been mistaken, we all know that. But what Anna was talking about gathering that evidence, we've also set up another site, which is forourkids.org.uk. Now on that site, you can actually submit evidence. If you know of anyone who's been injured or harmed due to this, you can submit that evidence to us directly on that portal, and that helps us to then take that further. On there you will also find an affidavit letter, which you can fill out and sign and send to us. Because the more of these affidavits that we get from the people, we can then use those to take further action lawfully and legally. But we need your help to do it. We can't do it, on our own. Okay, it's because all of you, if you think about why we're here for our future, and we're here for our kids, and we do not want this to harm one more person. But all of you got to help. Okay, I hope that's clear. Love you all.
Right, I'll just wrap up then, everyone. So, just to remind...
Oh, what the hell?
They're trying to stop me speak. These people here, right? They're trying to stop me speak.
Boo! Enough.
What's he doing? What's he doing?
Oh, what are you doing? Shame on you! Shame on you!
What's he doing?
God knows.
What the hell's going on?
Fuck knows, fucking idiot.
You know who he is, don't you? It's that Mark Steele. He's the 5G activist, isn't he? Yeah. What have we just been saying? I'm not going to go the right way.
Hey up! Down, darling. Well,
So what's happened?
No, I ain't got a clue what all that was about.